everyone turn their cell phones off for the duration of the meeting. I will ask the acting clerk to do a roll call and ask members of council to respond verbally.
Okay, Councillor Bush.
Here.
Councillor Carlucci.
Here.
Councillor Martin McKinnon. Councillor Shane McKinnon.
Here, and Councillor Martin McKinnon and I were just on a different meeting link, so he should be joining shortly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKay.
There.
Councillor Price.
Here.
And Mayor Wilson.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to call for declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act with respect to the agenda for this meeting.
I have a conflict on the firefighter remuneration report.
And the reason for the conflict card?
My daughter and brother work for the fire department.
And so when you're back in this part of town, I'll get you to fill out a declaration of pecuniary interest form that'll form part of the record, please.
Okay, Nelson, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have no delegations this evening. We have no presentations this evening. We have no public notices this evening. I'd like to ask Ms. Spielmacher to present her staff report.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to request amendments to Chapter 72, the fees and charges of the Municipal Code, by deleting and replacing Section Q, the cemetery price list. As seen in my staff report, we are proposing fees for columbarium number 3, which will include a resident and non-resident fee. Staff are also requesting that a non-resident fee be implemented for columbaria 1 and 2, as we currently have a resident and non-resident fee for all in-ground cemetery plots in the Dryden Cemetery. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Councillor Bush?
Yes, thank you, Patty, and thank you for taking the time to answer the several questions I had. When I started reading through your report, or finished reading your report, I realized how much I didn't know about the columbarium. So now, based on your responses, I know a lot more. So appreciate the new fee structure, and I think it's a very good idea from my perspective to have separate non-residence fees. I'm very happy that non-residents can enjoy some of the amenities that the Dryden City has, but I do think it's more fair that non-residents pay a little bit extra in areas where some of the activities that we have, including the cemetery, are supported by taxpayers. So I think it's only fair that they pay a little bit more and contribute to the upkeep and the ongoing care and maintenance of the facility as well. So you answered all my questions. Thank you very much, and support your report. That's my perspective.
Councillor McKinnon, Shane?
Thank you, and thank you for the report, Ms. Spielmacher. And I just wonder if you have an idea of the percentage of traditional interments versus columbarium interments. I understand we're getting many more requests for columbarium than traditional.
It's more cremation. Cremation and columbarium are the same. Traditional, we might have one a month sometimes 0. It all depends. They're very few and far between now.
There's more of a request for space.
Yeah, for cremation and in the columbarium, yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, no more questions. Okay.
If not, we'll bring a bylaw to the July council meeting.
Okay. You're in there?
Move on.
Okay, I'd like to ask Chief Grimwood to present his staff report, please. Chief?
Thank you. Good evening. This is my quarterly update for the second quarter of 2020. On page 7 of the report, you'll see an update on staffing levels, which have now stabilized. We had 4 recruits. We started with a class of 11 new recruits, and 4 of them deferred their training because of COVID. They worked in the healthcare field or had some other factor that made a deferral better for them. The other 7 are now complete their recruit training and responding to calls. So right now we're at a total complement of 41 with a target of 45. So once the 4 that deferred their training join, we'll be up to total complement. In terms of call volume, we were down the second quarter, which is something that's been trending right across the province. Less businesses open, less fire alarm systems activated, less people on the road, less travel. So our call volume was down 17 calls over the same 6-month period as last year. No real anomalies in terms of the call volume distribution. We're not noticing any concerning trends in terms of running more types of incidents than would be considered normal for us. On page 9 is a representation of our firefighter turnout and response times. You'll see all of which actually improved in the second quarter of 2020 over the first quarter. The average number of firefighters attending calls increased, and all of our response times decreased. Again, that is something that to a degree we're able to attribute to COVID. We had some of our firefighters who traditionally would be working at a workplace and unavailable were assigned to work from home, and it broadened their availability for us. So we did notice a bit of success in terms of more firefighters and a quicker response time. Then there's just a summary of some of the significant incidents that we responded to. Generally, again, nothing concerning, nothing that we would consider abnormal. We did have a pretty serious structure fire on Highway 17 through that period, a few different industrial fires at Domtar, a fire that threatened one of the hotels along Government Street, but again, nothing that I consider out of the ordinary. On page 11 is a summary of our training initiatives, and this is perhaps where we've noticed our biggest success. The firefighters contributed almost 1,300 hours of training alone in the second quarter. We took firefighters and put them through a firefighter survival and rescue course, which is the first time that training's been offered in Dryden. We had a number of firefighters complete their NFPA certification testing, and just this last weekend, we ran firefighters through a water rescue training course. Just to put those numbers in perspective, all of last year, through 12 months, the firefighters did 1,500 hours of training. This year, through 6 months, they've done more than 2,100 hours. So we've already far exceeded what we did in the totality last year. And the training has all kinds of different benefits. It improves morale, it improves engagement. We've noticed our attendance numbers up. Our firefighters are safer, we're performing better. We had a fire on Saturday that went like absolute clockwork. It's the demonstration of teamwork that you only get through repetitive training. And on the last page of the report outlines our fire prevention activities. The pandemic had really taken a bit of punch out of our ability to get out and inspect businesses, but we're over that now, and we've started getting out and started doing physical inspections. So we focus most of our time during the pandemic on trying to use social media and promote fire safety through non-traditional means, because we weren't able to do our traditional school visits and public engagement and community events and such. And then there's just a breakdown by month showing call volume and trends. From my perspective, the quarter went well. We utilized a bit of downtime in terms of prevention and call volume to really ramp up our training program. And frankly, I'm absolutely thrilled with where we're at from a training perspective, our response times, our firefighter turnout, our firefighter engagement right now. I think everything is exactly where I would hope it would be. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Councillor McKinnon Shane?
Thank you for your report, Chief. I have two questions, and the first one is on budget. And many budgets have been affected during COVID-19. And I just wonder if the budget, you mentioned fire prevention as possibly being affected or affecting the budget, but generally, are we on target with the budget assigned to the fire department at the start of the year?
Yes, through the chair. Actually, just today, my department received from our finance division our 6-month budget report that shows where we're at for actual spending at the end of June. And we are forecasting, through our 6-month period, we've actually forecasted below budget. A large part of that is that we've gapped the fire prevention officer position. So that full-time fire prevention officer position we did not fill. And then as COVID came, we recognized that there wasn't the ability to get out and do the inspections, nor was there the ability to train the position. So we've left it vacant, assigned the fire prevention work to the deputy chief, redistributed some of the internal responsibilities, and for that reason, we are forecasting spending under budget at this time.
And will that be permanent, or is that just while we go through this emergency?
That's correct. It is not permanent. We're going to reevaluate in the fall and then post and fill the position. The big driver for us was that the fire college shut down all of their fire prevention officer courses. So even if we recruited a candidate, we weren't able to provide them with the necessary training. So it made more sense to defer the hiring and reallocate the funds to different priority areas right now.
Thank you. One more question, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I was just interested in some of the training that was done, and naloxone training, obviously for folks who are experiencing an overdose of some kind. And, you know, if people encounter that on the street or wherever, they can call 911. But what other departments or areas in the city are the folks trained, just as a resource if someone needs them?
So through the chair, what I know is all police officers carry naloxone, our frontline fire trucks carry naloxone, and paramedics and EMS, and then I know public health as well. I can't say with certainty that that's an exclusive list. I'm not sure what other community resources are. I do know that the programs with public health and the pharmacies do distribute naloxone, though, to persons at risk and families with people at risk. So they try and get the naloxone kits out into the right places where there is, people who are combating opioid addiction. They'll try and get naloxone kits to those people and friends and family. That's often most effective.
Thank you, Chief. I guess for a layperson like me, I should learn how to say it first before I venture to try and help somebody. So thank you.
Roger? You had something to add?
Through the chair, Chief Grimwood covered off the answer for Councillor McKinnon quite well. So.
Okay. Any other questions for Chief? Councillor Bush?
Yes, thank you, Chief, through the chair. Just a couple of questions. Looking at your manpower, it looks like Hall 2 is still a bit of a challenge for volunteers. Are the 4 volunteers that haven't completed their training yet due to COVID restrictions going to be at Hall 2, or is Hall 2 going to continue to be a bit of a challenge? I just wondered what your thoughts on that were.
Through the chair, that's a great question. So one of the 4 is definitely a Hall 2 firefighter. They live in the area. 2 of the 4 live on the border. They live along Sandy Beach Road, so we'll have a little bit of flexibility in terms of where they deploy. And then the 4th is clearly lives in Hall 1's area. Hall 2 is, and this is not unique to Dryden. It's a real struggle to recruit people in the rural area. I mean, it's just a simple philosophy of the urban demographics and the density. Out of the 7 recruits that just graduated their training, though, 4 of the 7 are for Hall 2, and they live in Hall 2's area proper. They live within the catchment. So, we're very happy with that. They were struggling along with only 8 firefighters, so the fact that we just added another 4 and increased them by a third is a real big win for us.
Okay, that's great. Again, through the chair, the second question relates to open air burning complaints. And I'm just wondering about the nature of the complaints. Is it things like smoke, or people ignoring bylaws, or size of brush piles, or what's that all about?
It's a little bit of a mix of everything. Some of them occurred during the MNR total restriction, where people will call because they see any fire at all, regardless of its size. Some of them are because of smoke migration. People that don't have air conditioners and have their windows open end up with smoke migrating inside and causing health concerns. And some of them are simply people calling because the size of the fire exceeds our safe guidelines. So it's a little bit of a mix of all of them. Although, to be fair, we haven't had any really serious offenses. I mean, we attend and we ensure that the homeowner's in compliance and ask them to extinguish the fire if the smoke's bothering neighbors. But we haven't had that fire yet from an open air fire perspective that's threatening structures. So people are generally being fairly responsible this year, in my opinion.
Okay, that's great to hear. Just one other question / comment, I guess. When I look at the reports, and as you have reported, a lot of positive things have gone on, and you mentioned the number of firefighters per call and response times improving, training improving, and community engagement, which is another well done. But if you look at big picture, what would you say you're most proud of? And secondly, what do you see as the department's biggest challenges going forward?
Easy answers through the chair. Most proud of training. Training was the one area, when I first got here and polled the firefighters and asked them what would make the biggest positive difference, it was overwhelmingly that they needed more training and they needed a solid fundamental training plan that they could believe in, where training was scheduled and they knew exactly what was being done and what curriculum was being followed. So training for sure is the biggest win. The biggest gap is without a doubt fire prevention. It was a very responsible move of us to defer hiring the prevention officer because the training wasn't available for them, but it just continues to add to the backlog of fire code inspection and enforcement that needs to be done. So we are looking forward to the Ontario Fire College opening up their training, getting that person in place. There is quite an inspection backlog that has occurred over the years.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, Greg?
Thank you. Hi, Chief. Just a couple of questions. One is, I'm assuming that all the targets that we see on the report, they're all based on provincial standards, right? Like they're not, there's for rural, I imagine, or are there any local that we see in there?
Through the chair, the call volume standards where it says percentage of firefighters, percentage of calls where we've achieved 6 in 14 and 10 in 10, those are NFPA standards. The response time targets are ones that we set locally, but they're based on best practices of the fire underwriters. And the total average number of firefighters that we're looking for is also based on best practice. So it's a little bit of a mix of NFPA standards and best practices.
Got it. And then just a second question. I remember this was a bit of a concern, politically speaking, back a year ago or maybe 2 years ago, but are you concerned at all about the high level of medical assistance calls which turn firefighters into paramedics, or is that not an issue?
It's in my opinion, it's not an issue. We, for a few different reasons, we have the luck, I guess, of one of our paramedics is a supervisor with Northwest EMS, and then one of the new recruits is a supervisor. Another supervisor used to be a Dryden firefighter before he moved out of the city. So with that, we've been able to develop an excellent relationship with Northwest EMS. We coordinate all of our training with them. We coordinate equipment with them. The tiered response agreement is working the way it is. We've only gone to 20 medical calls this year, which is good. I mean, you don't want to overwhelm the firefighters. I think the system is working well. It's getting us to the calls that we really need to go to, but it's not overutilizing our service. The firefighters are well trained. We're able to and well positioned to be able to provide that patient care. I have no concerns with the program at all as it stands. Actually, I think that's been another big success for us, is getting our patient care training and equipment up to a level where we're able to provide that really effective care.
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate to have the people that we do have on staff, you know, and it's just a really glowing report. I'm really pleased to see these kinds of reports. So thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions for the chief? Okay. I'd like to ask Ms. Pecos to present her staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's my staff report on the volunteer firefighter remuneration policy. We would like to change the policy to include revising the retirement recognition program to define retirement as having served 10 years or more, and resignation as having served less than 10 years, and increase the stipend to $10 per year to $25 per year. We would also like to add ESA vacation entitlement on earnings. So that would be either 4 or 6% depending on the years of service. So there is a financial contribution implication to this. Because we would be adding ESA, the expected additional cost per month could be about $650. And then the average retirement age from previous retired officers was 22.75 years, so which could potentially be $570. The current years of service, however, right now is 6.24 when you divide the 41 firefighters by the number of years they have combined. So it's very low right now, the years of service, when you look at it like that. Is there any questions?
Councillor Bush.
Yes, thank you for the report, Jennifer. And I just have to say that I'm very pleased to see this report coming forward proactively. We've had too many years in the past where issues have been brewing with respect to these kinds of items as it relates to firefighter remuneration resolved. That created some ill feelings within the fire department and some lack of morale. So appreciate these coming forward. I just have a couple of questions for clarification. The vacation entitlement, at what years of service does the 4% jump to 6%, just for information?
It would be 5 years of service.
5 years, okay. And as you noted that was actually a statutory requirement that we do this?
It is not. It is not ESA requirement, as per volunteers are not recognized as being an employee. So that's why the policy would reflect that. We would put that in our remuneration policy. It's not legislated.
Okay, because the statement in the report says this is required under legislation. Volunteer firefighters are not exempt.
They are exempt from that. Past practice and provincial practice is they're included by individual organizations, but ESA says they are not included because they are not employees. They're volunteers.
Okay. All right, so we're proposing to do it, but in fact, it's not a requirement.
It is not a requirement. We're looking at following the practice that the province follows with volunteer firefighter departments.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I would just say to both of those that given the amount of money that's involved that you've described and the work that our volunteer firefighters do, in my mind, as one councillor's point of view, I think that's appropriate from my perspective. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Mayor. Right.
Hi, just a simple question. I'm just wondering, what is a weekly call check?
Rob, may you answer that, please?
Sure. Through the chair, the firefighters are divided into platoons, and so there's 9 platoons in total, and each week a platoon comes in and does a check on all the trucks and equipment. So they bring all the fans and saws and generators off of the trucks, start all the equipment, make sure everything's fueled up and in proper working order. So it just rotates through on platoons. So that's one of the approved activities they've always been compensated for.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Any other questions? Seeing none, okay, thank you. I'm going to now ask Allison to present her staff report.
Okay, I have 2 staff reports this evening. The first is asking council to provide direction regarding support resolution requests. The first request comes from the City of Brantford, and their council passed a resolution in May to declare March 17th as Essential Workers' Day and to call on the governments of Ontario and Canada to make the same declaration to honor the essential workers who sacrificed so much during the COVID-19 pandemic. Brantford's resolution also invites all municipalities to proclaim March 17th as Essential Workers' Day. And we're just wondering if that is something council would like to support.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Bush?
I think I would tend to support that myself. We do have a lot of essential workers, and I'm thinking well beyond our healthcare workers as well. When you think of the people who run the grocery stores and provide other essential services and take on elevated risk, even with takeout restaurants and people working at Walmart, Safeway, etc. It's a small bit of recognition for people that are out there and providing those things that we need, including people who work at Domtar and the maintenance people that they bring in to keep those operations running so we can all have toilet paper and tissue, etc., etc. So I would certainly be supportive of doing something like that in recognition of the times that we're in.
Okay, I've got a question. Does their resolution define who the frontline or essential workers are in response to what Councillor Bush has said?
They are talking anyone, it looks like anyone that the province has deemed to be an essential, working in an essential service. So then they list off a whole load of people, including but not limited to healthcare, police, fire, paramedics, military, social services, community services, food distribution, agriculture, postal and delivery services, education, security, transit, financial services, hospitality, commerce, manufacturing, construction, maintenance. Should I go on?
Yeah, construction. I'm
You're
for
happy
this.
now? Okay. Anyways, there's about half a dozen more. But yeah, it's not just.
Okay. So what do we have to do?
We would, if council is in favor of this, we'd bring forward a resolution to the council meeting.
I support that.
Okay.
Okay, so we can bring that forward on the 27th then. The second part of this report is regarding the second resolution request coming to us from the town of Orangeville. Their council passed a resolution in June to ask the Solicitor General to provide clarity on police oversight to ensure effective accountability continues, that annual updates or refresher courses be mandatory to ensure police services have the best and current information available to them, and that use of force protocols be reviewed to ensure they are safe and would meet current standards. And again, we're just asking if this is a resolution council would like to support.
Any comments? Or Councillor Bush.
Yeah, I have to say when I first read this, I'm a little bit less inclined to support this one from a personal perspective. And I guess the way it kind of reads off the top, it sort of implies that we have a problem in our police forces in this area. And I'm not sure that we do or we don't, but before I would be personally prepared to support a resolution like this, I'd like to hear from our police chief about the issues that Dryden has and what they're doing, and listen to what they have to say before I'd sort of jump on this and kind of imply that maybe we have a problem when I don't know if we do or we don't. There's not enough support for the police forces, in my view, in a lot of areas these days, and that's something that concerns me greatly.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I'm kind of along the similar lines. I mean, on one hand, it doesn't really cost anything to say, hey, let's do more training. But on the other hand, it seems to me, based on my experience with DPS and so on, and just looking at where the lines are, it seems to me it's really part of DPS oversight and not really part of our jurisdiction. I mean, we can speak to it, sure, and we can say whatever, we'd like to see whatever, but it's really up to the DPS to bring that forward, let's say, to the Solicitor General.
Councillor McKinnon. Shane?
I just, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just wonder if the council members who represent us on the Police Services Board, whether this has been discussed at the board level and if they've endorsed this or endorsed this resolution at all, or a form of it.
Go ahead, John.
Not that I'm aware of that it's been brought forward, Shane, but at this point, or Councilor McKinnon, sorry, no.
Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Bush?
Yes, such a resolution, through the chair, I think any such resolution, obviously, as a city, we've got our own police force, but we're intricately involved as well with the OPP, who regularly do patrols and also support our community, and to a bit of a lesser extent, so does Treaty 3. So there's more than just our local police services involved in this as well.
Okay. So I would think that we could talk about it at the Police Services Board and kind of take a look at it there rather than here, if you guys would be okay with that.
I agree.
Good with that?
Okay.
Okay, thank
So,
you. I got another report.
Sorry?
I have another report.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Alison.
Thanks. Okay, my second report is to request council approve changes to the parking time-limited section of Chapter 150, Parking and Traffic of the city's municipal code. And within this section, there's definitions of overnight parking restrictions on certain city streets from October to April of each year, as shown in the attachment to my report. Staff is recommending a change to this section to read as follows. Within the city of Dryden, no person shall park a vehicle A on any highway from the hour of 2 a.m. on the last Sunday of October to 2 a.m. on the first Sunday of the following April, between the hours of midnight and 7 a.m. The intent is to ensure vehicles are not parked on streets overnight to allow for street plowing when required. Parking is allowed during the day, and there may be portions of streets that can't be plowed due to parked vehicles, and the overnight prohibition will allow Public Works to clear locations that are inaccessible during the day. The prohibition would be citywide, and the clarification of the bylaw would simplify interpretation for the Public Works, the police, and bylaw enforcement. Are there any questions about this proposed change?
Councillor McKinnon. Shane.
Thank you. I just, first of all, Madam Clerk, I was wondering what the fine is for breaching that bylaw.
I actually don't know. I believe it's a provincial offense, so I'm not really sure what that fine is.
Okay. Well, I just had the opportunity to look up some other municipalities and how they deal with this particular issue, and I realized we have a schedule of streets that are prohibited from parking on in order to facilitate main thoroughfare and business snow plowing during the winter. But this would restrict parking, period, throughout the winter on the streets. And I'm thinking about homes with one parking space. Other communities make exceptions for some of those homes. Other communities have alternate parking days. You park on northwest streets on even days and, or I'm sorry, north-south streets and east-west streets on odd days. And then many communities have something similar to what we have to facilitate the travel on thoroughfares. But what I'm familiar with is under the Highway Traffic Act, Section 170, 170.12, and I can read it to you. And it says, despite the other provisions of this section, no person shall park or stand a vehicle on a highway in such a manner as to interfere with the movement of traffic or the clearing of snow from the highway. And that comes with a $50 fine and then a surcharge on top of that. So that is in regards to any street. So I don't know whether we need to really amend this bylaw to include all streets. I don't think we're plowing every street every night, and I think it would be kind of onerous on people to have to move their vehicle all the time in anticipation of a fine when it hasn't snowed out for a week or 10 days. But that's just my opinion. I think we've got enough legislation on that particular aspect of movement of traffic in the city.
I believe from discussion at the traffic committee level, anybody parked on the street, it's a reactive. It's not a proactive approach to finding anybody. It would be on a reactive basis if Public Works has to plow, because of course they have their minimum maintenance standards they have to meet on a particular night. If they have to plow down the street, if they encounter vehicles parked during that time, they would then be able to call the police. It wouldn't be just, because it's a Thursday night, we're going to have the police called out to go ticket randomly in town every vehicle. It would be when necessary. But it would be, because it's in the bylaw, then it would be able to be enforced.
Okay. Any other questions?
Oh, Blake's waving his hand.
Oh, Blake? Is that you?
No, I just wanted to reiterate what Allison was saying about, we did look at multiple municipalities in the area, also outside the area. Everybody does seem to have different bylaws with this, whether it's one side of the street or another. Another reason we're coming forward with this, because we had certain streets labeled before, and really back then it was, I believe, bus service. Right now it's really important that we plow the streets that do have school bus service. School buses change routes on occasion as well. We are also getting multiple complaints from residents about certain streets where there's multiple cars parked on the street, and we never do a good job of plowing their street, and so it's multifold, this issue that's come about. And we tend not to, we're not calling the police or making issues of it unless we are plowing it. There is a storm in effect and we're trying to plow the roads. The intent is not really to go hand out tickets every night to people parking on the street. But when there is a storm and we're plowing, they should be aware they should be keeping their vehicles not parked on the street, so it's not affecting our work with plowing and sanding, etc.
I've got a comment. Could we put wording in there that you could be ticketed if you park in that between those times and those dates? You just kind of give a little, I don't know.
I'm thinking if you put it in your bylaw, it's pretty much that this is the law.
Okay. Sorry, Shane. So, okay. So what?
Does anyone else have, any other
Not
councillors have
seeing anyone.
anything?
Oh,
Councillor
sorry.
Bush.
Nora. Councillor Bush?
Yes, through the chair, I almost hesitate to bring this up, but, and maybe it's only me, I just find that first point under A, where we talk about on any highway from the hour of 2 a.m. on the last Sunday of October to 2 a.m. on the first Sunday of the following April between the hours of midnight and 7 a.m. It just reads kind of odd to me. Is it midnight or is it 2 a.m. or should it just all be midnight to 7 a.m.?
This month, 2 a.m. on the last Sunday to the 2 a.m. to the first Sunday, I mean, if you wanted to make that midnight, I don't think that makes any difference to the world at large.
No, just, I don't know what happens to those 2 hours on either side, but.
You get your good parking or you don't get the good parking. It's just, that was the, move forward from the old bylaw, but I mean, that's easily enough change to midnight as well.
Yeah,
For consistency.
might just Thank you.
Councillor McKinnon, Shane?
I think that was, if I'm not mistaken, Madam Clerk, was the way of designating when this started and stopped,
Yeah.
and not to illustrate or to create a time when the fine would start. Because midnight, to me, to start fining people at midnight is, I think, too early. Maybe Mr. Poole can jump in as to the hours that you would be plowing, but I think you still have people out and about, certainly not myself at midnight or 2 in the morning, but I think 2 a.m. was the traditional start time for those types of bylaws, and I know from experience that we laid a lot of tickets in regards to interfere with snow plowing, because they were so obvious. But I don't know if Mr. Poole has a comment on that.
Yeah, we do plow at various times in the evening. Early morning hours, we find we get our best plowing done then when there's no traffic on the streets, no kids going to school, etc. So we do bring the crews in fairly early. Could be midnight for the graders. Anywhere from midnight to 2 o'clock, the graders usually come in if we've had a big storm the day before. Just to mention that the last time with the bylaw that was previously in place, people could park for 3 hours, and there was, within that time frame between midnight and 7 a.m., I believe it was, could park for 3 hours. And it was very hard for us or even the police to identify if the person had been parked there, what hours they were parked there, unless we went back 3 hours later. So unless it was covered in snow, of course, here. And as Shane was saying, there is under the Highway Traffic Act, there is that law as well. You can't interfere with snow plowing, but unfortunately, the tickets are usually given out after the fact, after the snowplow's gone around it. Now the vehicle is sitting there, surrounded with snow. That once they drive out, it has to be plowed again or cleaned up again here. So it is given that ticket as well, but I would say it's more after the fact. We would have to discuss that with the police.
Who's on the hook for the muffler laying there? Anyways.
I think Councillor Carlucci has his hand up.
John? Councillor
Yeah, thanks
Carlucci?
to the chair. Yeah, for me, this is more of a, because I've seen it on our street where they've plowed around the car, and then once they've got out, it sounds like a major safety hazard area happening with these big clumps of snow are stuck in the middle of the street until you have a chance to come back and plow it up again. But so I support this 100%. If it means a little bit more safety for our citizens, then I think we should do that. You know, I've seen it where the plow's gone around the cars. The next day or two, it's been this big lump sitting in the middle of the street, which isn't a safety thing either, right? So anyway, I support it, Allison.
Okay, so.
Anybody else got anything?
No.
Okay, so then following up on Councillor Bush's thought, should we change it for the Sunday thing to be midnight? For everybody to be to have consistent numbers?
I'm good with that too.
Okay, so we can move forward with that bylaw for the council meeting then.
Thanks.
You bet.
All right, so we have no notices of motion this evening. And so I guess Councillor Martin McKinnon, you got any comments for tonight? I'm not getting ahead of myself, am
Well, it should have been the mayor first.
Just
Okay.
a
sorry.
few,
Okay, I'll do it right.
because I don't want this meeting to be too short. It's always good to hear the fire chief come and talk to us, and just when you think you've got the best, he makes it better. They get better. So I'd like to thank all those wonderful volunteers that are our firemen, and for the time and commitment they put into that training. You guys are fabulous. Thank you. To my fellow councillors, you folks all had the Kenora District Services Board report in the last couple of weeks there. If you got any questions on what's in there, give me an email and I'll respond to them for you. I'd like to give a big shout out to the Dryden Rotary Club and the Dryden Native Friendship Center for making sure our community had a pancake breakfast on July 1st. That's a tradition that just about went by the way, and through their hard work, lots of people got pancakes, and they were good pancakes. So thank you. Community wellness and well-being plan is the social development part of that organization is still meeting regularly. They've been first concentrating a lot on on providing isolation for homeless people in case they need a spot to go during the virus situation. They're still doing that, but they've expanded a bit into the concern of the homeless in our community, and there are lots of homeless in our community right now. There's lots of people living in the bush around us that we aren't aware about. They're there. That committee's working on making sure they get water and driven to the right food sources and that sort of thing. So just be aware that committee is still out there working. Thank you.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. You should have went first. Please.
I finally got you, Greg.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it'll go down in history, I think, Mr. McKinnon, Cousin McKinnon. No, I'm used to being one up. I just had a couple of things. I'm really thankful that the restaurants will reopen to inside seating this week. I mean, that's a huge thing. That's probably one of the biggest things for Dryden among some of the other announcements that'll impact us. I just wish that it was that easy to get the tourist camps up and running because it's kind of a lost season for them. And you can imagine if you have you just bought a tourist camp in the last 2, 3, 5 years and you got big mortgage to pay off and so on, and you have no revenue coming in. That's really tough. So I feel for them. And I think really the biggest challenge ahead for us, really assuming that we just keep on moving in this trajectory, is going to be getting the students back to school in whatever form or fashion. And a positive out of this this whole experience with COVID-19 is that it does force us to rethink how we do things, and can we do things better, more efficiently, more effectively. So that's a good thing to come out of this. And we're not out of the woods yet, but at least we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bush?
Yes, just to build on one comment with respect to supporting our local communities and businesses. I had the opportunity on the weekend with a couple of friends to go out to one of the tourist camps on Eagle Lake and enjoy an evening on their deck and have a hamburger and a sandwich and a pop. And so those folks are struggling mightily with all of that, with all of their facilities really not generating any meaningful business. So as much as we can, and locally here in town, I think it behooves all of us to do what we can to support our local businesses. Secondly, Councillor Shane McKinnon, Councillor Price, myself, as council members are part of the Master Plan Steering Committee, as you know. And we, along with Roger Nesbitt, have been working on a couple of the strategic priority goals as it relates to community diversity and inclusion and economic diversity and inclusion, particularly with respect to our Indigenous population. So at the next council meeting coming up, and we'll circulate some documentation ahead of time, we would like to propose a way of working on our strategic goals, specifically around developing support systems to integrate, familiarize new and existing citizens to the city of Dryden. We recognize not all of whom may be Indigenous. Continuing to foster positive relationships with Indigenous peoples and neighboring First Nations communities. And the last goal under economic investment and diversity is partnering with Indigenous organizations and communities and other organizations to foster local and regional economic growth. So we have some thoughts about how to proceed forward with respect to those strategic plan initiatives. And as I say, we'll be bringing that forward at the next council meeting. And our hope is that we circulate something ahead of time for everybody to read, and that we can review that document and get council's blessing, hopefully, to move forward with the proposed plan. So I won't say too much more about it now until we've had the opportunity to actually put that in front of you. Councillors Shane McKinnon and Councillor Price may have some additional comments on that as well. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Price, Michelle?
Yes, good evening. Just a really busy June, and I guess we're halfway through July right now. Been very busy with PACE, with financial assistance, part of that committee for RIFs, as we call it, and helping go through applications for mainly resorts looking for financial help. There's been a couple of small businesses outside of that as well. So we've done in June and in July, there have been 5 meetings so far. I think we're getting down close to the end of funds, and the applications seem to be getting lower now. So that's been going well and taking up quite a bit of time with that. We've also been busy with, we're still going ahead with the Fall Festival plan, taking into consideration that things may change as we go along for COVID. There is a website now available that you can go on and take a look at. If you type in Dryden Fall Festival, that website should come up for you. As Councillor Bush had mentioned, that we're deep in planning for part of the strat plan, meeting with the Darn Committee or members of the Darn Committee and Mr. Buer to talk about ways that we can go about having inclusivity and with Indigenous people. So we've been busy with that one. Oh gosh, another one, just attended the PACE AGM meeting on the 30th, and you're now speaking to the chair of the board. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but here I am. And yeah, so it's, as also Councillor Bush had mentioned, that we have some developments going on that we're still working on, and once we have more concrete information on that, that will be very exciting news to pass along. So yeah, that's been my life for a month. That and 4 birthday parties in 1 week.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlucci?
And nothing to report through the chair other than enjoying my time with my 2 incredible grandchildren. So taking a few weeks off from the city. So, but thank you. But I'm here tonight, so like you signed in.
There, thank you. That sounds great, John. Councillor Bush, Shane?
Myself, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that Police Services Board Chair Judy Green's appointment to the board is anticipated to expire this month. And in the event that Ms. Green is not reappointed, I want to express my gratitude for all the work she's done since joining the board, I believe in May of 2015. As we are all aware, during her time at the helm, we've gone through a police costing in our community, and we also see many changes and challenges to policing in all areas of policing, really, and more so today. But throughout, Ms. Green has kept supporting our police service in the protection from and prevention of crime as a mission of the board, and she has demonstrated care and consideration for those who serve our police officers and for their families. And if you know Ms. Green as I do, I would not be surprised to see her sitting around the city council table in the future. So sincerely, thank you very much, Judy, and happy birthday. Thank you.
Okay. I couldn't agree with you more, Shane, in what your comments. So I think it's I guess I'll call a adjournment here.
Would you like me to
Yeah.
find a mover and seconder?
Yeah.
Could I have members of council to move and second the adjournment motion, please? Oh,
I'll move.
Councillor Carlucci and Councillor Bush. Boy, there's a fight for that one, too. 9. Okay, moved by Councillor Carlucci, seconded by Councillor Bush, that this meeting do hereby adjourn.
So we got a vote. Okay, everyone vote verbally. Councillor Bush.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. It's carried.
Aye.
Okay.
This meeting is now stands adjourned. Turn off the lights.
All right, good night, folks.